Ever wondered what to do when this happens? Or better yet, how to avoid it? Well, let me show you how to master beach driving like a pro without breaking a sweat. Before you even hit the sand, preparation is key. Here's what you need to know to make your day a success.
First things first, you want to make sure you pack all your essentials such as tyre deflators, any recovery boards or recovery equipment that you have. Also, recovery points, they're very important when you're going onto the beach. Other things you've got to keep in mind is things like your water, checking your tides for the day, any vehicle permits that might be required to go onto that beach. And also the other essentials are trying to keep in mind your sun safety. So if you're going out in the sun, get some sunscreen on, have a hat, things like that. Try to mitigate any sort of skin damage you're going to get while you're out there enjoying the day. When it comes to deflating your tyres, we generally recommend to go between 15 to 20 PSI, especially for beach driving. That's just because you're wanting to maximize as much contact patch with the sand as possible. You're going to try and flatten out your tyre both ways. It's going to elongate it and also widen that tread pattern and help it sort of sit on top of the sand instead of digging down into the sand. Because once you start digging, you're going to get bogged. Now, there's lots of different types of tyre deflators you can get just from various retailers online. You can get things like this, where it's sort of you screw it on, you take out the stem, and then you can air down that way. Or you can get something called like a quick deflator, which is a simple, you screw it on, it's set to a certain PSI that it's going to go down to, and you sort of walk away and you start putting the rest on. And once you sort of come back around, it's generally done that first tyre you started on. Other things that you can sort of bring along for the day are things like air compressors, so that way when you get off that beach, you can re-inflate your tyres. Now, you don't have to have an air compressor. You can get to a service station if there's one nearby that beach, but generally when you're deflated your tyres down to about that 15-20 PSI, don't exceed about 80 kilometers an hour, because you will screw up your tyres and you'll probably screw up some wheel bearings as well while you're trying to get to that service station to re-pump up those tyres. Another important thing to remember when you get to that beach finally is to put your car into 4 high or 4 low. Generally speaking, for going onto the beach, most beaches you'll be able to get in there on 4 high. If it's really, really soft and you need to take a slower speed as well to not dig down and not sort of overwork your car, going into 4 low does help with that. And you'll be able to sort of crawl through the sand instead of trying to keep up that momentum getting through the sand in 4 high. Now, for this particular car, I'm lucky I don't have to hop out of the car to sort of engage my hubs to put the car into 4 high. I'm able to simply just move my gear lever into 4 high. Now, with other older cars or other various vehicles, you might have to hop out of the car and lock the hubs and then engage the gear lever into 4 high or 4 low. Other cars as well have a dial on the dash where you need to sort of push down and put it into 4 high or just turn it into 4 high, things like that. Just learn your vehicle, see how it works in order to engage those modes, because you want to be in either 4 high or 4 low before you even hit the sand, because otherwise you are going to start bogging down with those rear tyres.
Now, once you're on the sand, it's important to remember 3 key things, and that is momentum, don't stop suddenly, and stick to the tracks. And what I mean by all of these things is momentum is basically you just want to keep momentum in order to keep working your way through that sand easily, not getting yourself bogged down. And that doesn't mean you have to go really fast. You don't have to go like 80 Ks an hour. That's not what I mean by momentum. I'm going a nice 50 Ks an hour right now, which is what the speed limit is of this beach. I've got no hazards in front of me. There's no children, no other vehicles, no animals that I can see, but I'm always on the lookout for that. But I'm keeping that consistent 50 kilometers an hour, sometimes slowing down to 40, depending on if there's a hazard I need to sort of avoid, such as maybe like a log, or I have to slow down because there's some people on the beach, things like that. But outside of that, yeah, keep that momentum going, because that's what's going to keep you above that sand and stop you from digging down. Now, with regards to sudden stops, you don't want to be doing that, because just imagine you slam the brakes on, all of your weight transfers to your front. It's going to start digging you down like a shovel into that sand, and you're just going to make a huge bog hole with your front wheels. Once you try to go again, you have to try and crawl yourself out of that bog hole that you've just created in order to start going again. And a lot of cars, that's where they struggle. They'll start spinning. The tyres that don't have as much traction will start spinning and they'll just bog themselves in, and that's no good. You don't want that. It's really just going to cause you more hazards. You're going to have to then recover your vehicle out of that bog hole because you've decided to slam the brakes on. Now, the other important thing is stick to the tracks. And so sticking to the tracks basically just means try to follow other tracks already created by other drivers. This is to help mitigate any wear on your vehicle, makes it a lot easier for yourself as well, especially if it's your first time on the beach. It's going to cause a lot less fuel consumption, because if you're trying to forge your own track, you're having to basically force your way through that sand yourself. And that's a lot for a vehicle to do, especially if you've never really driven on the sand before. That can be a lot to ask of your vehicle. Now, when it comes to river crossings or any water streams, you definitely want to slow down for them, because oftentimes it's called a washout and you're going to fall into a little bit of a dip before you go through that water and then back up the other side. And that can cause a lot of damage to your vehicle if you don't do that correctly. So we've just simulated my car getting bogged to be able to show you guys how to actually get out of those bog hole situations. So the first sort of step is try recovery tracks like these max tracks here, because that's going to be one, your safest, and also when you're sort of stuck in sand like this, it's probably going to be your easiest option as well. A little tiny bit of work to get these in, but once you get them in and you work out how these actually work for your vehicle, such a no-brainer when you get stuck on the tracks, on the beach, in mud, things like that. It's such a lifesaver, these things. So we'll go ahead and show you how to get out now. So first sort of step is you're going to want to try and get these in front of the wheels. I'm going to try and get out of this bog hole forwards. So I need to try and get these max tracks in and sort of slightly under this tread. But in order to do that, I need to clear out all of this sand. So if you don't have a shovel, a really cool trick is you can actually use the max tracks as a shovel. So it's as simple as that. You sort of just start digging out the sand, and then once you've got to a certain point, you can start to really wedge these max tracks in. I need to do a little bit more digging under the front here, but once you get that in, you'll be able to shove these all the way under basically in order for the tread to be contacting this max track. So now I'm going to attempt to get the vehicle out using the max tracks that are in the front of my tyres. So when you're doing that, you want to try and pick a lower gear so that way you're not sort of spinning your tyres constantly on those max tracks. You want to try and grab them slowly and then use the max tracks as traction to pull yourself out. So I'm going to put my vehicle in low range and then I'm going to sort of just ease under the throttle to try and grab that traction with the max tracks and get myself out that way. Here we go. And it's really as simple as that. You just wait till the car grabs those max tracks and you just roll on out. So if you can't get out using max tracks, or you just don't have them, but you do have a snatch strap, this is something else you can use to get yourself out of that bog hole. Now, I wouldn't recommend running straight to the snatch strap when you get bogged, because it is a dangerous tool. It can quite heavily injure someone and possibly kill them if you use it incorrectly or something goes wrong. So use this with extreme caution, because if this breaks or pulls the D-shackle off or something like that, it's going to cause a lot of harm. So to start off with these snatch straps, you're going to want to use a bow shackle or a D-shackle like this, secured correctly per their specifications on the vehicle. So in this instance, it's going through the tow ball mount. It has a correctly rated high tensile bolt holding that in, and then this bow shackle is rated enough for this particular pull. So you need to check your vehicle's weight and try and at least double your vehicle's weight with the ratings for the particular ropes, and then with your shackles and stuff like that as well. So from here, you simply just open up the shackle, you thread it through, and then you tighten it back on. Now when you're tightening this back on, go all the way and then back off a quarter turn. And that's just purely to make sure that those threads don't bind up when it's under load and seize up, so then you can't actually get your rope back out. So that quarter turn is just going to loosen it up just a little bit, so that way you can actually still get those threads back out, but still hold securely to the vehicle. Now my vehicle does have 2 front recovery points, and you can use those as well, but you only really want to use the front recovery points that are rated with a bridle, it's called, which is basically a mini strap that goes between 2 points on the front, and then you put this strap basically through the center of the bridle and then pull off the bridle instead of the actual recovery points themselves. If you don't have a bridle, you can still recover off the front. It's just be careful, because it can rip that mount off potentially if you're pulling really hard and you're overloading that recovery point. Now on the rear of this vehicle, we're going to be setting it up as well. And then you want to make sure you keep a nice straight line pull when you're recovering a vehicle, in order to not twist this rope, not sort of pull it to one side, causing any harsh angles. And it should just pop straight out of that hole, and we'll show you how that works now. So now that you've gotten home from the day, you've had your fun on the beach, you've got one last thing that you need to remember when you go beach driving, and that is you need to make sure you get all of the sand off the vehicle. So now we've got to go through and wash absolutely everything, clean out the interior, get the sand out of the vehicle as well, because it's going to cause a lot of rust. If you let that just sit and stay on the vehicle, you have a lot of problems down the line. If you leave it there, things like your bolts and your nuts and everything like that underneath are going to start rusting and seizing. That's a nightmare to fix. When you need to like upgrade a part or something needs to get replaced down the line, it's going to cause a lot more extra hours of work that a mechanic's going to need to do, which then increases the cost of your bills. And we see it all the time working in suspension mainly, that all of the control arms, things like that start to seize, and it adds a couple hours to the job basically, and it's a nightmare for the customer. Sometimes it requires entirely new control arms because we just really can't get it out, or new camber bolts because we have to cut the camber bolts in order to get that arm out of the car. And you just don't want that. So make sure you clean over everything, get all the sand and salt off. Clean your chassis rails. You don't want sand inside them because that'll cause rust once again as well. What I like to do is I will wash the car, wait till it dries, see where the sand is still again, and then wash the car again. Sometimes there's still sand after the second wash, so then you might need to wash it a third time. But basically try and get all of the sand off the vehicle as much as possible, just giving it a really good rinse. Sometimes you can even leave a sprinkler underneath the car for say 20 minutes and let that sort of move it around a bit and let that sort of clean out as much sand as possible. Yeah, make sure you clean your vehicles.